Every family has a story, and every story has a beginning. Leon and Edna Cahoon began their life together when they were sealed for time and eternity in the Alberta Temple on July 23, 1941. In honor of the 50th anniversary of that occasion, we have compiled a brief synopsis of their lives. Leon A. Cahoon, the sixth child of George Edward and Anna Louise Cahoon, entered this world on September 4, 1913, in the farmhouse in Levitt, Alberta, attended to by Anna Liza Baker, the midwife who happened to be the grandmother of his future wife. Sister Baker was well known throughout the area for her skills as a midwife. An oft-repeated statement of Leon's father George was, "Go like you were going for Sister Baker," which meant, hurry. Leon's oldest sister, Irita, recently described their home environment this way.
Beautiful, the most beautiful farm that ever could have been created.
Life was busy on the farm. It seemed there was never an end to the work, plowing, haying, breaking and riding horses, feeding pigs, sheep, chickens, and milking 15 to 35 cows by hand, which Rex says was the only time they could sit down on the job. Leon says he never knew he had any choice but to work, work, work. Work was often interrupted by family swimming parties at 27, skating at the reservoir, skiing on Coyote Hill, and berrying on Timpanogos or in 21. Evenings were spent in the parlor around the piano, singing or playing their instruments. Leon played the trombone in the family orchestra, which often provided music for church dances, sometimes receiving 50 cents or $1 a night for their services. Ellen tells of how they learned to play.
I remember playing in an orchestra with Leon, along with my other brothers. It took them all to teach me how to play the piano, but I would listen to the radio and learn the tune and then teach it to the rest of them because we couldn't afford to buy music, and that's the way we played for the orchestra.
Ellen and Rex remember Leon as a young boy this way.
Leon wouldn't go to school, didn't want to go to school because he couldn't read, and he thought he would be embarrassed. I remember another thing about Leon. Irita was cutting his hair one day, and the last cut of the scissors, she had a hard time getting it through the hair, but she pushed extra hard and happened to cut his ear, and he thought he was badly dealt by.
At home, Grant must have been 3 and I was 2 years older, and Leon was about 2 years older. We were down with Father at 27. He was doing some summer following, and we were not minding our own business. But we had these buffalo beans, these yellow. We ate those blossoms by the cupful, and they're poison, and we got sick. And when he found out what we'd been up to, he put us on the old saddle horse, Phi, Grant behind Father, then I, and then Leon behind me, and he rode the 1.5 miles to home. By the time we got there, Mother Nature had made the cure, and we weren't going to die of poisoning after all, but we regurgitated all these blossoms. They didn't look near as pretty then as they did when we picked them. Incident that is a highlight in my life as far as Leon is concerned, and he led me into this, was when we decided that one day we wanted to spit brown. Uncle John lived with us, and he chewed old stag chewing tobacco. And he had just come back from Cardston. We knew he had replenished his supply, so when he left his room and went out to do the chores, Leon and I went up to his room, and we found his cache of old stag chewing tobacco. And we decided we were going to spit brown. So we bit off a chunk and chewed it down like a chocolate bar, and then we started feeling a little bit oozy. And we went slithering down the stairs in through the front room and out to the sink, and we started spitting. And for a while we thought we were going to die, and then we kept getting so sicker we thought we couldn't die. it would have been a pleasure to have ended the misery. Mother saw what we were doing, and she put a quilt and some pillows down behind the heater in the front room, took us in and laid us down there. She pretended that she didn't know what the trouble was, but she knew. She never scolded us because she figured that that would be a pretty good lesson. Thanks, Leon. We both spit and we spit and we spit.
At age 11, Leon was called to be secretary of the Sunday school. One blizzardy Sunday morning, the other members of the presidency were snowed in and didn't make it to church, which left Leon the next in charge. The bishop asked him the meeting. Leon was a great athlete, especially at basketball. Rex describes him as the slipperiest forward he ever saw. Nothing could stop him. He set a scoring record of 37 points during the MM 1931 Canadian Championship game. They won that game 42-28. During part of Leon's high school education, he and Ellen batched together in Cardston.
Leon and I had the opportunity of living together for 2 years in Cardston when we took grade 11 and 12. We batched it in a little one-room house the first year, and there never was a harsh word or argument or fighting, if you can imagine children living together without fighting. We got along super fine. One thing I do remember, he had two friends, Don Remington and a Shaw boy, but I can't remember his first name. But anyway, one spring, when the dandelions were in full bloom, they talked Leon into making some dandelion wine, and it was delicious. A good
33 found Leon on his way to BYU with Durans and Wanda. In 1935, Leon and Rex, with help from Ellen, who, as Leon says, always seems to be around when one needs help, and with help from other members of the family, attended Calgary Normal School and obtained teaching certificates. While there, they were both on the student executive, the basketball team, and played on the basketball team. For the next 2 years, he taught school in Leavitt. The little Baker girl, who Leon often wished had had an older sister, had suddenly grown up to be a beautiful, lovely lady. And what of this lovely Baker girl? Edna was born July 23, 1919, at Baker's home in Leavitt, Alberta, under the watchful eye of her famous midwife grandmother. Her parents were Janet Richards Baker. She was to be the only daughter, with 2 older brothers and 3 younger brothers. Among her earliest recollections are the wagon loads of Indians who came to their home. They were always invited to have something to eat, and took food such as potatoes, flour, bread, or whatever they needed home with them. When Edna was 9, her cousin Georgina came to live with them. Wallace makes this comment about this time of their life.
At that time, our cousin Georgina Richards came to live with us. Now Georgina's mother had died, her father had lost one arm in a steam engine accident, and he had 2 little girls that he couldn't take care of. So Georgina, being the oldest, came to live with us, and Joan, her younger sister, went to live with Aunt Iva and Uncle Ralph Leavitt. Georgina became a second sister to us, and we love her dearly as a sister. And Edna was very special because she, having been a girl in the family, now had to share the things that she had with Georgina. And they became very special, close friends. They grew up together, sang together, played together, and I never remember of any harsh words between the 2 of them. I remember when Edna, in her younger years, had scarlet fever. Now, at that time, scarlet fever was a dreaded disease, and she became delirious. And the power of the priesthood was the thing that people of those days believed in and lived by. And our oldest brother, Hiram, who was a long-distance race runner, was told to run and get Uncle Tom Levitt, and which he did, and Uncle Tom came, and he and Dad administered to Edna, and she miraculously recovered.
Also filled with much work. Georgina recalls that she was very helpful and skilled in all the homemaking areas from a very early age. Edna was a sensitive, caring young girl. Georgina was afraid of the dark, and Edna would always venture with her into a darkened room rather than send her alone. She took great pride in her appearance and was very good at styling her hair, and often styled Georgina's too, using Marcelline irons and a gooey setter made from flaxseed. Perhaps her care with her appearance is why Hiram says all he remembers about Edna as a youngster is always having to wait for her to get ready for school. Edna was a good student and enjoyed school. She and Georgina sang duets together in church and at gatherings. Through the years, her fine alto voice has been part of many groups. Rex admired Edna.
Edna, you always held your own with the boys playing Run Sheepy Run or Prisoner's Base or Hide and Seek and things like that. You had a pretty singing voice, a nice alto voice, and you're a very nice gal to have for a sister-in-law.
She was a good athlete and played on a girls' basketball team coached by, who else, Leon Cahoon. By now, her school girl crushes had moved through the Cahoon family and had shifted from Grant, who was her partner for the Maypole event in 4th grade, to Durance, her 6th grade teacher, then to Rex, whose guitar playing teamed up with Edna's brother Hiram on the mandolin, made the Everly Brothers of 1930. At age 16, Edna was called by Bishop Cahoon to be the ward organist, a position she held for 4 years. When she said all she could play was Catch the Sunshine, he replied, "Then we'll sing Catch the Sunshine until you learn something else." The yearly 3-act plays each ward produced and exchanged were a delight to look forward to. The year Leon returned from normal school to teach in Levitt, he accepted the leading role in one of these productions, and Edna was the leading lady. This was the beginning of their courtship. Association in plays, dances, and other varied and interesting activities and associations with good friends convinced Leon that Edna was the girl he had been waiting for. In the meantime, the bishop asked Leon to serve a mission, answering a desire he had long held. He was called to the Northern States Mission. One of the highlights of his mission was being part of a male quartet and dance orchestra, playing for ward and branch green and gold balls. They sang on many radio stations and toured that part of the country, performing as they went. A year after Leon left, Edna received a call to serve a mission to Eastern Canada. Although their association was put on hold for 2.5 years, their relationship continued to deepen through letters. Dear Sister Baker, how does that sound to you? Have you become accustomed to it yet? It's our day off today, at least we're taking it, and so I thought I would slip in a letter to you. Do you mind? And later in the letter he says, we are going to be up in Michigan soon, probably in 2 or 3 weeks, and so I'm going to watch my chance, and when I get near, slip across the border into Canada. Then you can expect some company, about 6 Mormon elders. Have you ever seen any before? How far are you from Detroit? Where is Niagara Falls from where you labor? Maybe we can do what we wanted to do for so long together, see the falls. Perhaps you've already seen them as much as you want to. I'm looking forward to seeing you. Interestingly enough, when Leon's quartet was assigned to go to St. Catharines, where Edna was serving, to sing at a conference and on the radio, the group was able to go to Niagara Falls together. Perhaps that visit furthered his feelings. In a letter a year later, he addresses her as darling. He goes on to say, I don't know what I've been doing since I last heard from or wrote to you. So I think I'll start by telling you that I love you very, very much, and I'm very proud of you and what you're doing. That is more important than what I've been doing anyway. I have talked personally to some of the district elders who saw you at Palmyra, and they tell me some very fine things about you, including your exquisite beauty, charming personality, and an all-round fine girl, and that you apparently still cared a little for me, all of which made me feel. Leon was also able to visit his sister Ellen while they were both on their missions.
Call one night, and it was Leon. He was out in the mission, his mission, and he was transferred just a short distance from where I was. So he said he'd like to come over and spend the weekend with me. And I was so proud of him. What a handsome young missionary. And he was very, very good.
Mission as district president of the South Indiana District and returned home to Leavitt in October 1940. He spent the year taking wages in lumber later used in the building of their first home on the farm.
Leon coming home from a mission and his speaking enthusiastically about his mission and saying that he felt like a fish out of water. And at that time I didn't know what a fish out of water felt like, but I knew that Leon was happy because of the glow around his face. And I got an early impression about the enthusiasm of a returned missionary. And I learned that from Leon. One of the first returned missionaries I knew, I guess.
While Edna continued her mission, proclaiming the gospel, sharing the message of the restoration. Of this time, she says, I shall forever cherish the friendships made and the spiritual growth and understanding of the gospel I acquired. Someone once said we go to university to learn how to make a living, but we go on a mission to learn how to live. I believe this to be true. I felt like a spectator at a ball game, standing on the sidelines, watching the game of life being played, learning that the truths of the gospel and the laws of God are by far the best rules to live by for the ultimate success in the game of life. Shortly before she was released from her mission, she received this letter from her mother, in which her mother writes, You will never know how much I have missed those confidentials we always had. Girl will be with me, and I am happy to feel that she will always be somewhere near me. Edna returned home from her mission in April of 1941. She and Leon took up where they left off 2.5 years earlier, and they were married on Edna's 22nd birthday, July 23, 1941. Shortly after their marriage, they moved to Orion, where Leon taught school grades 7 through 11 for $1,200 a year. Leon writes, It was here, while listening to the radio one morning, that Edna learned by a falling tree. What a blow! In rather poor health anyway at this time. This was very hard on Edna's mother, so Edna spent as much time as possible during her absence that I learned how much I really loved her. Their firstborn, David Edward, arrived 4 months later, 1942. In August of that year, they moved to the farm with Father and Mother Cahoon. Edna writes, I spent part of that winter with my mother while Leon worked in a lumber mill to earn lumber to build us a home. In the spring, he returned home again to assist Father on the farm. Father had when we first moved there. With the sale of her first litter, we were able to buy cement to run a basement for our home. With the lumber he had earned, and with the kind assistance of the men in the Leavitt ward, we started to build. We ran a race against time to have the house ready by the time the baby arrived. Ellen helped Leon paint while I was in the hospital, and we moved in the day I came home with Tressa. I felt like a queen. In 1945, with no money and no work available, Leon and Edna moved to Cardston and lived with Aunt May Hall. Leon remodeled her home, and Edna worked at the Cahoon Cafe as a cook. Spring found them back at home. In 1946, desperately seeking a way to make a living on the farm, Edna and Leon conceived the idea of raising turkeys on a large scale. Edna writes, this was a new idea for the area and financial backing was difficult. Lervet was in the Air Force. He had faith in them and some money to lend. With fear and trembling, we started the venture with someone else's money. Leon worked day and night to prepare the poults, and then there was the living in with them when they arrived, and the constant care and vigil until they were sold. It was a happy Christmas that year when we were able to pay Lervet in full and make our land payment. Broke again. November 12, 1947 welcomed joy to the family, and on October 1, 1949, Paul came to occupy one of the bunk cribs Leon had built. They were still living in their tiny 2 rooms in the basement, and much of her time was spent washing feed sacks to make sheets, quilts, and even diapers. She felt less queenly now. Still no plumbing. 1950 was an eventful year. They moved upstairs and bought an electric washing machine. October 12, 1952 welcomed another daughter, Carol, followed 11 months later on September 13, 1953 by Brenda. This same year, Leon and Lervais decided that there must be an easier way to make a living, and decided to return to the teaching profession. Leon moved to Hill Spring to teach, Lervais to Edmonton to get his teaching certificate, and Joyce and 5 children moved in with Edna and her 6 children. Leon came home weekends to keep things going in the turkey business, while Edna did the honors during the week. It was a busy year for all. After 12 years on the farm, the land was paid for, and Edna hoped to buy furniture for the living room. Instead, Lervais taught school in Leavitt and ran the farm to help Edna and Leon go back to BYU, where Leon accomplished the impossible, obtaining a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Education degree in 2 years. To keep the wolf away, he also taught a math class and laid brick, while Edna took in boarders and sold World Book Encyclopedia. After returning home, Leon accepted the principalship in Mountain View for 2 years, then at Leavitt for 4 years. Instead of raising turkeys, they now raised sheep. In 1963, Leon was offered a teaching position in Edmonton. After much thought, worry, frustration, and prayer, the decision to move was made. It was difficult to leave family and friends, but life in Edmonton was easier. Edna has often said she likes people better than sheep and turkeys. In 1965, to help relieve the financial pressure of a son on a mission and a daughter at college, Edna took a job as a telephone operator for an answering service. She worked a night shift and would come home in time to have family prayer and breakfast together and get the children off to seminary. Then she'd sleep while they were in school so she could spend time with them after school before she left for work again. That year, a French exchange student, Josiane Mombarts, also lived with the family. At the end of that year, Edna joined World Book again, becoming an area and then a district manager. She worked hard and made it possible for them to take a trip to Europe to pick up Joy, who was now an exchange student in France. They had a marvelous time camping and touring Europe for 6 weeks with Tressa, Joy, and Paul. They visited Jamaica in 1968 and Hawaii in 1970. After 7 years with World Book, Edna retired, later running a diet center office from her home. Leon taught school in Edmonton until he took an early retirement. He had contracted cancer and after surgery and radiation was given a beautiful priesthood blessing in which he was promised that he would not be taken from this earth until his mission in life was completed. After many years of service in the church in varied responsible positions, and following Leon's recovery from cancer, Leon and Edna embarked on yet another form of service, that of missionary work. They spent 18 months in the Indianapolis, Indiana mission and felt the joy when lives change as people accept the gospel. We held a family reunion in Crawfordsville that year and met many people who have become dear friends because of that association. Not long after their return, they were called to the Winnipeg, Manitoba mission. Part of this 18-month period was spent in teaching school on the Indian reservation, helping students to graduate from high school. They truly learned to love and understand the Indian people. The students honored them and expressed their appreciation at the graduation ceremony. Once more, dear friends were made. Again they applied for another mission and felt sure they would be called to the Washington, D.C. temple, but instead were sent to the Singapore mission. They became well acquainted with the humble people of Malaysia and India as well. It was a real cultural shock. Edna remembers how foul the air smelled when they first came to Malaysia. But upon their return to that country after 6 months in India, she found herself thinking how fresh the air seemed. Carol and Tressa joined them in Singapore at the conclusion of that mission, and together they visited Singapore, Bangkok, Taipei, Hong Kong, and Tokyo before returning home. Their most recent mission was to Salt Lake City as family history missionaries. It was a real treat for Joy and Carol to have their beloved parents spend a year in the same city. But with the exception of Sunday dinners, they were amazed at how little they saw of them. Wherever Leon and Edna go, they become totally involved in their ward and contribute and support in every way. In between mission ordnance workers at the Provo and Cardston temples, they have also found time to travel through the United States and most recently to Russia. As they celebrate their papers have been submitted, and once again they are anxiously awaiting the next mission call. Leon and Edna have set a wonderful example for their children of lives filled with much service both in and out of the church. So much love, so much giving, so much time. Truly a brother and sister to all. Lervais enjoys Cahoon.
Experience that I treasure, in a way I treasure, because I value Leon as an older brother, but I get kind of ashamed of myself a little bit because of it. The scene was the ball diamond over at Levitt. The time was after chores. The occasion was senior baseball practice, but we younger brothers were welcome so that two teams could be fielded for a better workout. I was at the bat and had struck out. I was not surprised nor mad, for played ball to have fun. But I struck out and I swore spontaneously. Why? Well, that's another story. I never did profane the name of deity. I didn't enjoy anyone else to do that, but I swore a blue streak. My brother Leon stepped towards me, shortstop, and he sternly addressed me and said, "Lervais, don't you ever talk like that again. You should be ashamed of yourself." And I was. The game went on, but all had heard the rebuke, and I was not thinking too kindly of Leon, for my friends were also there, you see. Habits are hard to break, but I remembered that incident. Thereafter, every time my tongue slipped. And a lot of other times, too. I sure love my brother for what he did and thank him. I related this story at a George Edward Cahoon family reunion a few years ago, and my nephew Kitchener Head was there. And when I finished the story, he said, "Thank heaven for big brothers. There should be a world full of big brothers." Now I want to say that any one of you can be a big brother to someone, whether you're related to them or not. I am grateful for a big brother. Now, Edna, I grew to know Edna very well. I spent many Sunday afternoons at the Baker home eating her mother's cooking, Sunday dinner. And I've learned that Edna had won the respect of her brothers because she had taken unto herself the attributes and the character traits of her mother, and her good looks, and the handsomeness of her father too. But this also won for her the respect of my brother Leon, and accepting her as a sister-in-law was as a piece of cake from her mother's table.
And I would like to say to Leon and Edna Cahoon, congratulations to one of the youngest looking couples celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. And I think perhaps your youthful looks is because of your service and your love for family, relatives, and friends.
Due to the tremendous example of our parents, all 6 of the children of Leon and Edna have been married in the temple and continue to stay active in the church, trying to emulate the tremendous legacy of service set by their parents. Yes, we will remember our own family swimming parties at 27, terrific home-cooked meals, huge gardens we all except for Tressa, who laid down between the rows and read a book, family home evenings, family prayer, singing around the piano and in the car, watching Mother carefully press their temple clothes, priesthood blessings, mountains of mashed potatoes and gravy, and the smell of homemade bread. But the one memory that stands out above all others, that we have each at one time or another experienced, is coming home later than usual at night and finding Mother, and quite often Father, on their knees praying for us, or of being the last one to bed and being asked to join them in their prayers together, and hearing them express their love for us to our Heavenly Father. With this memory so vivid in our minds and hearts, we end this tribute to the greatest parents in the world with the quartet Leon so often sang with, singing, "Your Mother is Praying for You."
Oh, many weary years have passed since last I made my home with you. My loving mother at the door said, "Oh, my boy, be ever true. In sore temptation, oh, your mother is praying for you." I saw the tempter's fleeting joys, like shifting scenes wherever new, and pleasure silent her charm.